Hello, my name is Linda Blair. I'm speaking to you from the Ranelagh Lounge at the Eastman Theater in Rochester, New York, home of the Eastman School of Music. I've been a cataloger at the Sibley Library since 1989 and a member of MOUG since the mid-1990s. When I first came to work here, I had the good fortune to be trained and supervised by Joan Swanekamp and Jennifer Bowen, both very distinguished leaders in the cataloging profession and both very involved with MOUG in its developmental years. I feel that I got the best possible education in the cataloging of music materials, and I've always been grateful for their mentorship and their fine example of professional leadership. It's such a pleasure to have them here today and to have the opportunity to talk with them about their involvement in MOUG as a part of the Oral History Project for MOUG's 40th anniversary. So I'll start first with Joan. If you could tell us, please, your current or your most recent position, the title and place, and also whether you were in a same or different position when you first were involved with MOUG, and then Jennifer can take over from there.
I retired about 3 years ago as the Director of Technical Services at Yale University, but my involvement with MOUG was primarily from the time I was at the Eastman School of Music, Sibley Music Library from 1979 through 1991.
And I am currently Associate Dean for Scholarly Resource Management at the River Campus Libraries at the University of Rochester, which is just down the road, about 3 miles from the Eastman School of Music. And my involvement with MOUG actually started when I was the music cataloger at Detroit Public Library. And my boss there sent me to MOUG, wanting me to get answers to some very specific questions about how to catalog certain things. And fortunately, I was able to come back with those answers, and so she was happy. And it was really through my early attendance at those MOUG meetings that I ended up at the Eastman School of Music, working with Joan and then later with Linda. And that's because I met Joan at one of those very early MOUG meetings, and through a conversation there I thought, and then I saw the job open at Eastman, I thought, I wonder if she'd actually apply, if I could actually get an interview there. And I believe it was through my our conversation at that first or second MOUG meeting that I attended that was sort of instrumental in my coming here. So I would not be sitting here today if it hadn't been for Joan in particular, and if it hadn't been for MOUG. So there.
Thanks. Joan, what were your MOUG activities and involvement?
So I served as the Vice Chair, Chair-elect from 82 to 84, from the Chair from 84 to 86, and then as the past Chair from 86, 87, I believe. Those were very early years for the Music OCLC Users Group. So a lot of my early work was lobbying OCLC for improved search capabilities. It was almost impossible to search composers like Mozart, Bach, Haydn. We also did a lot of MARC training workshops as part of MOUG. OCLC was still new, the MARC format was new to many libraries. So for those early meetings, those were critical parts of our program. And I think the third thing that was also important, that where MOUG was really instrumental, was helping libraries deal with retrospective conversion. At that point, everybody's libraries were just catalog cards, and we were beginning to see opportunities for online catalogs, but making sure to get all of those cards converted into some machine-readable form was a big task that went on in most libraries in the 80s and early 90s. And MOUG provided a lot of support for those activities as well.
And I had a similar role with MOUG about 10 years later. I was Vice Chair, and then past Chair from 90 to 92. At that point, MOUG had kind of hit its stride. I think things were pretty well established and humming along. I was trying to remember what actually was going on in the music cataloging world. One thing, when I was chair, one of the things was the NACO Music Project was just getting going, and Joan, of course, was very instrumental in that. I think Eastman was like the second institution that was involved with that. So we were putting together the NACO Music Project Advisory Committee, and that was part of MOUG at that time. So I served on that for a couple of stints. One was in the early 90s and then again later in the 90s. But again, we were looking at trying to fill out authority files for certain composers, and there were certain projects going for different composers, and Joan was reminding me that we did, I think, Stravinsky and Schoenberg here at Eastman, and our colleague Linda Barnhart out at UCSD did Prokofiev. I remember her working on the Prokofiev project. Another thing that was going on, as Joan mentioned, that you couldn't search major composers in OCLC because it would there were just too many hits. So the best of MOUG became a thing, and I don't even know if people would remember what this is, but anyway, I have my show and tell here. This publication went through 8 different editions. The first edition was edited by our colleague Anne. She was Anne McCullough at the time. She's now Anne Caldwell at Brown University, and then Judy Weedo, and then I think Karen Little, I think, was the editor as well. And this was lists of all the headings that you couldn't search in OCLCs, and these were compiled. I think they were originally in the MOUG newsletter, weren't they?
Yes.
Yeah, and then they were brought together in this separate publication, which is why it was called The Best of MOUG, which only probably a few people know why that name came to be. But anyway, those were some of the things that I was involved with early on.
Thank you. Who or what drew you to MOUG? Joan?
Well, I attended the very first meeting of the Music OCLC Users Group in 1978 in Boston. And this was the first opportunity, the first really big opportunity for music librarians to share their cataloging and to share their work, which meant that you didn't have to do the same thing over and over in each music library. And that was the opportunity to think differently about how we did cataloging was really what drew me to being involved with the Music OCLC Users Group. Another thing that was really important at that time period that is probably lost to many younger librarians was that OCLC provided a way to produce catalog cards in a much more automated way. Before then, we spent a lot of time copying cards and then actually typing added entries and subjects on the tops of cards. This was very painfully tedious work, and OCLC offered the opportunity to just do this in a much more automated way, and every day a box of cards would come and they were just ready to file. So, it was changing the way that work was done in libraries starting in the late 70s and moving on into the 80s. The opportunities were just incredible.
Let's get some water,
So for me, I think what initially attracted me to MOUG was the ability to get advice on how to catalog things and how to catalog music, which was not exactly easy. And as a new person in the profession, I really needed that. And in my first position at Detroit Public Library, I was the only music cataloger, so there was nobody that I could ask. So it really was extremely valuable to me to go to MOUG meetings and to get to know and talk to people like Glenn Patton and Jay Weitz and Joan Scudema, who was at OCLC at the time, and to be able to, as my boss would say, go pick their brains and find out how you should catalog this one specific thing. Of course, I was a little embarrassed to go up and ask those questions, but they were always extremely gracious and took the time. And I think it was that really nitty-gritty, how do you do something in this particular situation, that I just found so valuable to increase my skill set as a music cataloger.
Sorry about this coughing thing. Could you tell us your favorite MOUG memories?
Well, I thought a little bit about this, and I have a couple of them. And I think maybe one of the most important things that I want to say about that is that I've served on a lot of different boards and in a lot of different elected capacities during my professional career. But the camaraderie of the members of the Music OCLC's users group was something that was really special, and there weren't politics. It was just all about helping one another, and really, kind of sharing the work, sharing the responsibilities of trying to get as much stuff cataloged and available to our users. There wasn't a lot of a competition at all. It was really just trying to do the best for our users and to help our other colleagues. And that environment was just a wonderful, supportive opportunity for all kinds of music librarians. I think one other thing that came to mind, I made mention of the fact that one thing that was important was working with OCLC, lobbying them to make some improvements in the database structure that would really allow for better searching. And we had a lot of letter writing campaigns. We didn't call it lobbying in those days, but I remember Tom Sanville, who was the primary programmer at OCLC, recounting at one point the piles of letters he had received from music catalogers, making the case that they had to make improvements in the search capabilities for music. And I thought, well, that was a job well done. We did what we were supposed to, and it did put it onto the front burner, and the improvements did come along a little gradually and maybe not as fast as we would have liked. But it really, I think that the Music OCLC's users group was really successful in working with OCLC to make those improvements, and that I think was I felt really good about that as especially during my time as chair.
And I would echo what Joan just said about the camaraderie, that some of the people that I got to know, colleagues in MOUG, are still some of my closest friends in the profession. And we still get together at ALA for dinner on Friday nights. There was this sense that we were all just trying to accomplish the same thing. And we weren't trying to, necessarily better our careers through MOUG or anything. It was really about how do we do our jobs. So some of my favorite MOUG memories, I think, are the board meetings. We had one here in Rochester, and there was one in UC San Diego, and another one we had at OCLC, which I thought was totally cool. That was the first time I visited OCLC. I guess another memory that I found a little intimidating at the time, but was pretty important in my later career, was that MOUG had the money to send the president or the chair of MOUG once a year to the user council meeting in Dublin, in Columbus. And I don't know if you got a chance to do that.
I did do that.
Yeah,
and
I did that once. And of course I was terrified. I didn't know anybody there, but the NILink folks from New York kind of took me under their wing. That was back when we had the regional networks, right? That's what they were called, yeah. So I kind of hung out with them, and I kind of learned what was going on with OCLC, which I found kind of fascinating. And a couple of years ago, when the call came out for nominations for what's now called the Global Council, I put my name forward, and I'm now a delegate. So I get to go to OCLC at least once a year. So here I'm actually sitting on that body now that I was sort of kind of intimidated by a couple decades before.
Well, thank you so much for the interview. If you have anything else you'd like to share, we could do that now.
Well, I'd just like to say that, it's just kind of amazing that MOUG's been around for 40 years, so it's just pretty amazing. And I don't know if you all ever thought that would have been the case when, in the very early days of MOUG, that there would still be a need for a user group for MOUG 40 years later, or that the group would be such a, long-standing.
Yeah, I think I didn't even think about 40.
You don't think about 40 years
forward. And the purpose has changed with time. But the fact that it has been able to remain relevant in for music librarians and for music catalog librarians in particular, I think is really a true test of time. Yeah, those early years, it was just kind of figuring out how to do it. And the Music OCLC users group was really instrumental in expanding the way music libraries in particular think about making their collections available, sharing their collections with other libraries, and providing a far improved user experience. Those were things that were not always high on our list, but they really, they are the places that OCLC and Music OCLC's users group has taken the organization over those 40 years.
Well, thank you both so much for coming, and I've really enjoyed having the opportunity to talk with both of you and to hear these stories. So thank you.
Thank you, Linda. It's been a wonderful trip down memory lane.